If you want to live and leave a legacy, these are the things that you need to be doing right now. Who are the 10 to 15 people whose opinion matters most to you? But I'm just assuming that the person that I'm talking to on the other end of this truly wants to grow by listening to this podcast and doesn't want to just be entertained. If you want to be entertained, there's a lot of other podcasts that you can go listen to. This podcast and these men and these families, we want transformation. We don't want just transformation. We want to be fruitful through our transformation to attract other people into this lifestyle. Welcome back to another episode of the Steve Weatherford Show. John Maxwell is one of the best leaders that I know, and he said that you need to know thyself to grow thyself. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share with you the 6 ways that you can transform in your self-mastery, aka I'm going to give you 6 ways to get feedback to help you to lead yourself better so you can master yourself. Because part of the way that you and I become more valuable is by becoming more masterful, right? And one of the ways that we become more masterful is getting awareness to the areas that we have weaknesses or that we have gaps. And one of the ways that I'm going to share with you to be able to take you to your next level is 6 different ways in that you can get feedback to make adjustments, because one of my friends, his name is Dr. Billy Alsbrooks. He says champions make adjustments, not excuses. And so I don't want you to be an excuse maker. I want you to be a results creator. And one of the ways that you can create more results is by making more adjustments. And one of the ways that you can make more adjustments is by getting more feedback. And so I'm going to share with you 6 ways in 3 different categories that you can get feedback and make adjustments. And the first category that I'm going to share with you is going to be the physical, right? I'm going to share with you 2 ways that I get constant feedback to make adjustments to take myself to the next level physically. And the first one is by wearing this band that I have on my wrist. It's called a Whoop band, right? This is not an advertisement for Whoop, although I will put a link below this video. And if you use that link, you'll get a free band, but there is a monthly service that's required for you to get the most out of this band. But I share with you because I've worn this for almost 5 years, and I take the feedback that I get from it every single 24 hours, and I see how hard has my training been in these last 24 hours, and how do I need to make adjustments to my nutrition, to my training, to my hydration. And I make adjustments every 24 hours based upon what my body is telling me. A lot of pro athletes or hardcore people would be like, don't listen to your body, no excuses, and pay your price. And I think that's important. But also, if you're going to be a pro and you're going to stay a pro for a decade like I did, you're going to learn to listen to your body. You're going to learn to discipline your body, but you're also going to learn to get feedback from your body. I wish they had this Whoop band when I was in the NFL, because I would have optimized how I rested and trained. But one of the things that I did is every Friday, as I took a nap, my wife would actually take our kids, leave the house from like 3 until 5 p.m. every Friday, because I was on a routine, on a rhythm of resting my body on a Friday, knowing that I'm going to be performing at my peak on Sunday. So one of the ways that I get feedback and make adjustments every 24 hours is with a Whoop band. And I think they have an Aura ring, and I think there's several different types of ways. I think the Apple Watch does it. I also wear a Garmin watch, and the Garmin watch does it as well. I just have seen that the Whoop band is given me the most consistent results over the longest period of time, and so I trust it the most. One of the other ways that I get feedback that helps me to make adjustments so I can transform in how I lead myself is every 90 days I do blood testing. And with that blood testing, it helps me to get awareness to where my hormones are, where my stress markers are, where my cortisol levels are. And so based upon the feedback that I get in that blood profile, I can adjust my lifestyle, I can adjust my nutrition, I can adjust my supplementation, or I can adjust my hormones. I've been doing TRT therapy for about 4 years now, and I use a company called Transcend. And I was a client of theirs for about 6 months, and I noticed the massive impact of not just hormone replacement therapy, but I also started doing peptide therapy. And so I take a combination of peptides and hormones pretty much 24/7, 365. And I don't do that just to build muscle and be lean. I take brain peptides. I take a compound called body protecting compound 157 that helps with recovering from injury. It helps with joints. I've got a sore back and arthritis in my hip from playing in the NFL. And so I get my blood tested every 90 days to get that feedback, to make the adjustments. And one of the feedbacks that I got a couple of years ago was all of a sudden my blood profile was telling me that I was toxic in mercury levels. And one of the adjustments that I made was I was eating a lot of sushi, and I didn't realize that a lot of sushi and tuna has a lot of mercury in it. And so that's just one of the small ways that if you're getting constant feedback every 90 days, you're never going to get to the point where you're deathly ill. You're always going to be optimized because you're constantly making micro adjustments. And so I just shared with you 2 ways in the physical that I get feedback that helps me to transform in my self-mastery. And now I want to share with you 2 ways that I get self-awareness, 2 ways that I get feedback that help me to transform relationally. And the first one would be 2 times per year. So every 6 months, I send to 15 people, I send a self-awareness form. And so there's several different self-awareness forms that you can find for free on the internet. Inside of my coaching program, we've actually created this self-awareness form that helps us to get feedback and to grow in the areas that matter most to us. And so that's one of the ways that 2 times per year, I'm getting feedback that's giving me awareness to the gaps that I have according to the people that matter most to me. Like a lot of us are getting feedback from what people think about us on the interwebs, and we think that we should be making some adjustments based upon other people's opinions of it. I'm not talking about getting awareness from people out there. I'm talking about being really intentional. Who are the 10 to 15 people whose opinion matters most to you, and sending them a form. And then when you get that feedback, asking follow-up questions and saying, hey, like, I'm noticing that you're saying like that I really struggle with acceptance and forgiveness. And I was wondering, what are some ways that I can improve in those areas? Like, yeah, that takes a really big boy to drop your peaches, send that form, and then have the follow-up conversation. But I'm just assuming that the person that I'm talking to on the other end of this truly wants to grow by listening to this podcast and doesn't want to just be entertained. If you want to be entertained, there's a lot of other podcasts that you can go listen to. This podcast and these men and these families, we want transformation, right? We don't want just transformation. We want to be fruitful through our transformation to attract other people into this lifestyle. The second way that you can get feedback relationally to grow to your next level is, I just recently did a podcast on this, and the title of the podcast, we'll put the link in the show notes of this podcast, but it's called The 15 Minutes to Save Your Marriage. And essentially what I do in that podcast is I walk you through how to have a general's tent meeting with your wife, and that's going to give you feedback every 7 days. It's a meeting that I have with my wife, and I take my notebook that I have right here, and I ask specific questions, and I get specific answers, and that allows me to make adjustments for the next upcoming 7 days. Think about what a general would do before he goes into battle, right? He's going to have all of his captains and several of his leaders come into the tent, and they're going to discuss the strategy and the war plan that they're going to execute in the next couple of days. And that's the same thing that I do with my wife, right? I make adjustments every 7 days. And I didn't always used to do things this way. Like, understand, as I'm sharing this and teaching this with you, this is something that I had to learn on my own. Like, I had to make my mistakes. And after making enough of my mistakes and feeling stuck enough, I actually found a mentor. I'd always had mentors and coaches for sports and performance and then business, but I never went out and found somebody that really said, hey, listen, if you want to live and leave a legacy, these are the things that you need to be doing right now. And because I'm coachable, just like an athlete, when my mentor said, hey, cut this off, I cut it off. When he said, hey, start doing this, I started doing it. So the general's tent is going to be a place that every 7 days you're going to get together with your significant other, and she's going to help you to identify, man, these are going to be the enemies that are coming up in this next week. I detailed it all out for you in that podcast, so go listen to that podcast after this one. Okay, now we're going to move to the last 2 ways that you can get feedback so you can transform in your self-mastery. And the first one is going to be mentorship, right? Now we're going into, I told you 2 ways of physical, I gave you 2 ways of relational. Now I'm going to give you 2 ways of mental. And the first one's going to be mentorship, AKA coaching. That's where I got my biggest transformation, is when I found someone who had the fruit that I wanted, and they not just mapped it out for me, but they made me accountable to what needed to get done. I had a one-on-one phone call with my mentor, and it happened every 30 days. And so I would record the one-on-one phone call, and afterwards I would go back, I would rewatch it, I would look at my notes, and I would say, for the next 30 days, this is what I need to stop doing, and for the next 30 days, these are the things that I need to start doing. And I did that month over month, and at the end of that year, the areas that I was stuck, I wasn't stuck anymore. And the areas that I wanted to grow, guess what? I was starting to grow. And then I thought to myself, there must be something to mentorship and legacy coaching. Okay, now I'm going to share with you the second way that you can get feedback mentally that will help you to transform in your self-mastery. And this one's probably not going to be something that you've heard before, but if you want to grow in your self-mastery, you need to take a day off. And what do I mean when I say that? Honor the Sabbath. And this is something that I actually had to be challenged by my mentor to do, because I grew up in the Midwest and we don't take days off, right? Like, if you want to be a valuable man, be a productive and a busy man. And so it didn't make sense to me to take a day off in order to grow in my self-mastery. But something happens when you follow the instruction of God, right? Once I just said, okay, well, if my mentor says this is the way that God says to do it, that for 24 hours, I need to completely get off of my phone, not do any work, and really get plugged into my family, rest, go outside, be in nature, and get away from how things are so frenetic, right? And what that actually ended up doing for me is it allowed me to think more, right? Because if you're working that extra 7th day, like, maybe you are a little bit more productive in the short term, but in the long term, you never take time to think. You never take time to re-aim, recalibrate, refocus. And that's something that has allowed me to transform, not just as a leader of myself, but a leader to my family as well, is taking that Sabbath as I'm training them to honor the Sabbath, but they're also the beneficiaries of getting out of the busyness and learning how to discipline themselves in the way that God says that we should do life. So those are the 6 ways to transform in your self-mastery. And you might be asking yourself, man, why are you doing the podcast in a gym and you're sweating while you're doing the podcast? Well, this is the new HQ. This is our new ministry HQ. We just purchased this gym. It's been a dream of mine to have a place where we can come and we can train, where we can come and we can pray, where we can come and do the launching pad. I've been hosting all of these events out of my home, and I think it's been amazing that my wife and my kids have not just been willing for our ministry to happen in our home, but they've been active participants in it. But I don't know if you know this, if you follow me on social media, every Tuesday at 5:30 a.m. for the last 14 months, we've had anywhere from 25 to 40 men in our home worshiping, praying, taking communion together from 5:30 a.m. to 7:30. So for the last almost year and a half, my entire family has been woken up at about 6 a.m. to the sound of glory in my home, of men worshiping and praying together. But we've since outgrown our home. We can't fit as many men as we have in there. And so God has delivered to us a new place of transformation. And this is where we're going to be hosting the launching pad, which is a 1.5-day intensive that is a radical interruption in men's lives. And that's what I needed. 5 years and 2 months ago, I had a radical interruption with the Holy Spirit at a men's conference. And that's what set all of this in motion of who I am today and how I'm using my time, my talents, and my treasures. And so we've got several launching pad events. It doesn't matter when you watch this podcast or listen to this podcast, because we have a launching pad event every single month. And now we're hosting them in this gym, which is a 4,500 square foot facility. It's amazing. It is literally perfect. I can't wait to welcome some new friends into this space. But if this is the first time that you've listened to this podcast, I want you to make sure that you subscribe, that you hit the bell, and turn on the post notifications, because we come out with a podcast every Wednesday. Give this podcast a thumbs up, and we'll see you next week.